In previous lessons, we learned a lot of interesting data types that are suitable for storing string, integer numbers, floating point numbers, boolean values, and so on. But what if I need a data type that will store a fixed set of values? For example, I want to create data type that will store months, all 12 months of the year, January, February, and so on. And for this purpose, we will need enum. Enum, that is short for enumeration, provides a powerful way to create fixed set of constants, making your code more readable and providing the way to avoid many mistakes. So to create this enum type, we need to go outside our main function and use the keyword enum. And now we should give the name to our new data structure. I'm going to name it months, since we are going to store months there. And in the curly brackets, I'm going to write all 12 months of the year, January, February, and so on. Okay, and now when I have my enum structure, I can create a variable with the data type months inside of our main function. So our data type now is months. And now let's name our variable. Let's also call it months. And now we can initialize our variable with some value from the set we created. Let's, for example, create months equal to March. And you can see when I started to type March, I immediately see the hint from my IDE to select the month March. And if I now build my program, you can see everything is okay, my program is built. But if I try to write some different value to initialize my variable months with some different value, not from the enum set, let's say I do some typo and write March, and if I now try to build my program, you can see now I have error. March wasn't declared in this scope because this value March is not part of our enum collection. So let's fix it to March, and now we can create a bunch of interesting functions using our new data type. Let's, for example, create a function for accountant. The function that will say them if this month is the month of the quarterly accountant report, or it's not the month of the quarterly report, so they can relax. So the type of this function will be void, because I just want this function to print the message for my accountant if this is a quarterly report month or not. And the name of my function will be quarterly report. And the parameter of this function is some variable with the type months. And now in the curly brackets, I'm going to write the body of my function, where I'm going to write if-else statement. If this month is the month of the quarterly report, we're going to write that it's quarterly report month. Else we are going to write that it's not a quarterly report time, you can relax. Okay, now you can see the body of my function. It's if-else statement. So if month is January, April, July, or October, this is a quarterly report month. So in this case, we are going to write to the console, it's time for quarterly report. Else we are going to write to our accountant, you can relax. So now let's call for our function in the main function. I'm going to call for our quarterly report, and the parameter of my function is months. Now let's build and run this program to see the result. And since our month is March, you can see message, you can relax. If, for example, we are going to use month April, let's build and run our program. And since April is a month of quarterly report, we see message, it's time for quarterly report. Okay, and now let's write different function, also using our months enum, the one that will tell us what season it is now. So the type of this function also will be void, and I'm going to name my function season. And once again, the parameter of my function is months. And depending on the months, we are going to type to our user if it's summer, winter, fall, or spring. Okay, now you can see the body of our function. So if the month is equal to December, January, or February, we are going to type it's winter. If it's spring months, we are going to type it's spring. Else, if the month is June, July, or August, we are going to type it's summer. And else, we are going to type it's fall. Now let's once again call for this function in our main function. So I'm going to call for the function season, and the parameter is months once again. And you remember that our month is April, so it's supposed to be spring. Let's build and run our program, and you can see the result. The result of the first function execution is it's time for quarterly report because it's April, and our second function message is it's spring because April is a spring month. Okay, but what will happen if I try to write enum variable to the console? Because we need somehow to communicate with our outside world, somehow to deliver our variables to the users, and somehow receive these variables from our users. So let's create cout, and to the console let's try to write our months, and let's comment our function for a while, build and run our program, and you can see result is 3. When I try to write my months to the console, I receive result 3. If, for example, I try write some different months, for example June, let's build and run our program, and you can see that when month is June, I see number 5 in the console. So why it is that way? In C++, enum or enumeration are implemented as integer values. That means that when I create enum, I just give integers the name. So let's look at our enum, and you can see here I have collection of names January, February, March, April, May, and so on. But basically it's just names of integers. So January is integer 0, February is integer 1, March is 2, April is 3, as you saw in the console, May is 4, and June, as we just saw in the console, is 5, and so on. So when you declare enum, compiler assign to this integer 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on the names you set in the enum collection, January, February, March, and so on. But the good news that this assignment 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on, it's default assignment, and you can change it in the way you need. For example, if I want January correspond to the integer 1, I'm going to write in my enum collection January equal to 1. And when I declare enum in this way, now our sequence is different. Now January is equal to 1, February is equal to 2, March is equal to 3, April is 4, May is 5, and June is 6, and so on. And of course you can change the value of other months as well. For example, if here I assign April to 10, so January, February, March will stay 1, 2, 3, but now April will be equal to the integer 10, and May will be 11, June will be 12, and so on. But let's actually stay with this enumeration we created. Since January is the first month of the year, February is 2nd, March is 3rd, let's just stay with this enum where January is equal to 1, and so on. And now when we know that the values of enum correspond to integers, we can rewrite our functions in a more pleasant and smart way. So for example, here in the function quarterly report, I know that accountant should do quarterly report every first month of the quarter. So instead of this long check, we can just write if the remainder of months divided by 3 is equal to 1, it's time for the quarterly report. And the same here for our function season. Instead of checking each month, if month is December, January, February, I can just rewrite if month is equal to 12 or month is less than 3. So month is 12, 1, 2, it will be winter. In our second else if, we can check if month is less than 6. So months are 3, 4, 5, it's spring. Else if month is less than 9, it's summer, and else it's fall. So you can see that now when we know that the value of enum are equal to integers, it's much easier to work with these values. And once again, let's check that everything is okay. Let's check that our functions quarterly report and seasons are still working. Our month is June, so let's build and run our program. And you can see result for June, you can relax, it's summer. But if I check July is also summer, but it's quarterly report time. Let's build and run our program. And you can see that it's still working, it's time for quarterly report. it's summer. Okay, but what about reading enum values from the console? Since now we know that January is corresponding to its number in the year 1 and February corresponding to 2 and so on, for this particular case, I can ask user, can you please give me the number of the months in a year? So let's write cout, write a month's number. And now we are going to create variable month's number, and we are going to read month's number from the console. And let's move our month's declaration here. Months will be equal to static cast of our month's number. So I'm going to use static cast. We discussed in the previous lesson that with static cast you can safely cast one data types to another. So I want to cast my integer months number to the data type months. And once again, to check that everything is okay, we are going to use our functions quarterly report and season. So let's build and run our program. And for example, let's write the months number 2, February. And you can see the result, you can relax, it is winter. Now let's write months October. October is a fall month and it's also time for the quarterly report. And you can see the result, everything is working, it's time for the quarterly report and it is fall. So I hope this lesson was useful for you, and now you know how to use enums in C++. If you still have any questions, you can write them in the comment section. And I'll see you in the next lesson.